Hi there, and welcome to another episode of A Conversation with Father Orsi. I'm BC Cloutier, President of Action for Life, and this is Father Michael Orsi. How are you, Father?
Great. Always good to be with you, my friend.
Well, thank you. It's, for me, if I wake up on this side of the grass, it's a great day.
For me, if you ask me easy questions, it's a great day.
Let's jump in, Father.
All right.
A couple of weeks ago, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled, and I might add, ruled unanimously, 9-0, that embryos are human beings. Mm-hmm. Well, it set off a firestorm. But at the end of the day, I think, and I'm sure you do too, that they made the right call.
They did.
There are mm-hmm. moral implications, and there are medical implications, and I thought we'd talk about that.
Yeah, it's a great ruling. It's a great ruling for a number of reasons. The first reason is it's some very, very good jurisprudence in there. The judge's name was Potter. I think his name was Parker. Judge okay. Parker. And his reasoning was superlative, mm-hmm. just superlative, his reasoning. Secondly, it does bring up a very, very important issue that is not being discussed at all in our society until this ruling as to what is IVF and what are the moral implications of IVF. But beyond that, what do you do with the embryos right. that are produced by IVF? So it's a very difficult topic because reproductive endocrinology is not an easy topic. Is it a moral issue? How do you create these embryos? What can you do? What shouldn't you do? It's a religious issue.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a religious issue because you're dealing with creation. You're creating, literally helping to bring new life into the world. Mm-hmm. And is there a proper way to bring life into the world? But then, and this really has to be discussed because this is something, folks, that we can do something about. What do I mean by that? We have to have some kind of ethical guidelines regarding what do we do with the embryos and what protection do the embryos deserve because they are human life. And this has not been really looked into. As a matter of fact, it's been avoided. It's been avoided in many circles, even in committees of bioethics. They don't want to touch this. Why? Because when you look at this, you say to yourself, well, what do we do with the ones that are still in the deep freeze?
And okay, so let me ask you, what do we do with those? I don't think there's a clear answer.
There's no clear answer. I wish I could come in here and say, this is the clear answer. This is what we do. And there is no clear answer. The clearest answer I can give is this. What we have to do is protect the dignity of the embryo. So even though they are already created, and I'm not going to talk exactly right this moment about how they are created, but what do we do with the ones that we have, and what kind of guidelines can we have for taking care of them? That's the issue. I just wrote a piece for the New York Times. I'm sure they're not going to publish it. But they talked about, the difference between the Protestant view regarding IVF and the Catholic view regarding IVF. And the Protestants, for the most part, at least the evangelicals, don't even discuss the issue. There's sometimes, folks, there's some things that you just might be better off not discussing. I hate to put it that way.
No, it's true. You just ignore it and hope it goes away.
Right. But in the Catholic Church, this discussion has been going on for quite some time. Way back in the 90s, Pope Benedict XVI, when he was still Cardinal Ratzinger for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he gave a speech, and then he wrote a beautiful directive called Donum Vitae, the gift of life, as to what is ethical, what is moral, and how should Catholics behave when it comes to reproduction. So, if you're interested, the guideline by Cardinal Ratzinger, I think it was 1995, Donum Vitae. And certainly if you want, we could go into that. On the other hand, as I said, the article in the New York Times was the difference between Catholics who say IVF is not permissible under most circumstances. There are certain legitimate ways or moral ways, according to the church, that you can produce help someone get pregnant. Let's just put that way. Help someone get pregnant.
So let's go there, because there's, let me hammer on the Democrats for a while. They immediately, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, when this was a hot issue, I guess it still is a hot issue, but when it first came out, the Democrats said, you see that? Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that the Catholic Church has an issue with IVF, do they?
Well,
or does it, I should say?
Yes and no. All right. How's that? The issue would be...
Father, you sound a little wishy-washy. Well, maybe you are, maybe you're not.
I don't know. I mean, I've got to dance around this one, folks, because the issue with IVF is, for the church, that you are separating lovemaking and life-giving. Mm-hmm. So therefore, you are using an artificial means to join a sperm and an egg. And if that takes place outside of the natural act of intercourse, the church says, well, that is a moral problem.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. So what do we do in those cases? There may be some ways that we can say this is part of the conjugal act. And one of the solutions is to use a perforated condom. And that means to collect the sperm in the natural act of intercourse and then give the sperm a push by inseminating the woman with the sperm that was left in the perforated condom. Okay, so...
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, does this become, excuse me, folks, Jesuitical? I'm sorry. But that's one of the ways in which we can handle the concerns about separating life-giving from lovemaking. Mm-hmm. Does that work in every case? And the answer is no. The answer is no. The next step, of course, then, is to go to the reproductive endocrinologist. And this is a big field. This is a huge field. And I'd be surprised how many people want to have children, are unable to have children, and then they go to a doctor, a reproductive endocrinologist, and he'll say, or she'll say, okay, we're going to harvest eggs from the woman. Yep. And then we're going to harvest sperm from the male, and then we will create a certain number of embryos, and we will implant them.
That's a petri dish operation, right?
Certainly. We are, in that case, separating life-giving and love-making. Now, of course, then you have the question is, what do you do with the embryos that are left over?
Right.
Do you take only a certain amount, or do you take as many as you can and hope that the ones you take will be healthy, or that they will be able to implant in the uterus? Those are, the steps that are taken when you're dealing with implantation of embryos. And then, of course, the old question is, what about the ones left over? What do you do with them? And this is what happened in Alabama.
Right.
They were kind of waiting there. They were going to be used. Let's put it, they were going to be used. But there's some that are never used, all right? Some that are never used. And they were in what's called a nursery. That's where you have babies. I mean, even the term itself tells you there's something special here.
Sure, right? Sure.
Somebody goes into the nursery and lifts up the tray where the embryos are. And then, it's hot ice. I mean, that's the best way I can explain it. Cryogenics, it's hot ice. It's so hot, it burns the skin, drops the tray. And there are embryos in there from 3 couples who had hoped to use those embryos to implant and to have children with those embryos. So we do have a number of issues here. First issue is, should we use the technique of harvesting eggs and sperm and creating embryos? Secondly is, what do we do with the embryos that are harvested? Do we just keep them on ice and use them little by little until we get a baby? Or might they stay there forever? And there's a rental fee.
Right.
You have to rent the nursery, and that could go on for a number of years. And then after a certain number of years, you have to say to yourself, well, is it perpetual? Say the parents die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or they divorce and they don't want these embryos anymore. What do you do with these embryos? Question 2 is, can you say, experiment with them, give them to science to experiment with them, or create stem cells out of them. It happened with George Bush in 2007. What do you do with these germ cell lines that already created and experimented on?
So let's go to stem cells. A couple of things I'm curious about, but let's stay there. Is that okay in God's eyes?
Well, it's according to how you get the stem cells. And then also, what are you going to do with the stem cells? Because obviously, stem cell is made out of human life, made out of embryos. How many weeks? And this is not, a moral question anymore. It's immoral to be killing embryos to create stem cells. So you have a problem there too, and people will say, but look at all the lives you can save by, researching stem cells.
Yeah.
And so this is the question. What do you do with those embryos? Can you experiment with them? Can you grow them into, a stem cell line? And George W. Bush, as I said, at his administration, during his administration, said, just keep the ones we have grown already. Don't kill any more embryos. And to me, it was the wisest decision at the time. You have to be Solomon to figure this stuff out. He said, we have 7 lines, leave the 7 lines, don't do it anymore. But, when you're dealing with embryonic research, who's watching? Who's watching? And it's the
almost nobody, right?
That's right. It's the Wild West out there. And so, this issue, it's a conundrum.
Yeah.
It's a conundrum. It's a puzzlement, as Yul Brynner said in. Go ahead, Yul Brynner, King and I.
Oh, King and I. Of course, I should have known.
It's a puzzlement. So, when you look at this, you say to yourself, how do we begin to get hold of this? And what we have to do now is to have people who are willing to sit down on ethics panels and to discuss what do we do now. And you see, this ruling from the Alabama Supreme Court, it forces us to ask the questions as to how do we protect those embryos.
Right.
You see, a lot of people are making this like Planned Parenthood. They're screaming about everything, because you're saying it's human life. And once you say it's human life, then you can't kill it. And the IVF facilities in Alabama, they're closing down because they're afraid they're going to get sued. Yeah, well, the real issue is not the issue that the Supreme Court said it's human life and must be protected. The real issue is it has to be protected. Not, I don't know if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
human life has to be protected, and there is no protections. As I said, it's the Wild West out there. Sunday I talked about this in church, and a man came over to me and he said, gee, thank you for discussing that. He says, I'm involved in Washington State with a business that is involved with embryos. And reproductive technology. And I was very happy to hear what you had to say, because we're getting very little guidance from anybody, very little guidance from science, very little guidance from church, very little guidance from government. And it's about time that we begin to look at this and say, what do we do now? I think, folks, anybody of goodwill, and this is not a matter of Republican, Democrat, this is not a matter of people who don't want to call embryonic stem cell research bad or embryo implantation bad. It's a matter of how do you respect these embryos as life, as human life. That's the issue, and that's what we have to deal with. We could go cuckoo, and people are going cuckoo. Well, the Protestants say it's okay. The Jews aren't sure about the whole thing. The Catholics say it's not okay. We're never going to come to a consensus.
And I think before this Alabama ruling 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was a non-issue. People never thought about it.
That's right.
Now, the people undergoing IVF thought about it a little bit, but I suspect that most of them are thinking about having a baby.
Right.
So they're not thinking about what happens to the other embryos. They just want a baby.
That's right. That's exactly the case. They just want a baby. Now, believe me, I know of people who have gone through IVF.
I think a lot of us do.
Yeah. And I know a lot of babies born with IVF, fertility treatments. The bottom line is they're made in God's image and likeness. And no matter how they got here, they're here, and they've made a difference in the world. You had that woman, she's on The View.
Sonny Hoysen?
Yeah.
Is it Hoysen?
Houston.
Whatever.
Houston.
Sonny the wacko.
Yeah, and she's pro-life. And she said,
Oh, no, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I got the wrong person.
You're thinking about Whoopi. and the other one, there's another one on there, and Whoopi and...
Whoopi, she's certifiable. But anyway, let's stay with
Joy
Sonny.
Behar. Folks, I never watched the show, but I just read about some of the stuff.
But Sonny is the conservative voice on The View.
Right.
Yeah.
And she says, it's human life. And I think Whoopi or one of the other ones says to her, oh, how can you say that? She says, because I had 2 babies by IVF, and they're 19 and 20 now, a boy and a girl, and my life wouldn't be as wonderful as it is, except for these 2 wonderful children that I've had through IVF. Now, as I said, somebody wants a baby, the desire, the instinct for having a child is so strong that some people will do practically anything and pay any price to have that child. So we got to tread very carefully on this, folks, very, very carefully on this, because unless you have some skin in the game, or you know somebody that's gone through this, or you're talking to somebody who says, hey, I was born, because my parents had some embryo implanted into me. You can't go there and say, oh, no, that's wrong. That's immoral. And the implication then is you're immoral. And that's not true. Okay, baby is not immoral. Baby is not immoral.
Let's take a break. And then I've got another question for you. We'll be right back after this. Action for Life is proud to sponsor a conversation with Father Orsi. Action for Life is an all-volunteer, pro-life, interfaith ministry that's focused on the sanctity of life from conception to natural death. In addition to sponsoring this TV program, Action for Life provides financial support and life assistance to any woman who wishes to carry her baby to term in anticipation of an adoption. Action for Life also provides financial assistance to a variety of pro-life organizations, including maternity homes, pregnancy resource centers, anti-human trafficking agencies, and sidewalk advocates, but to name a few. Please consider making a donation so that we can continue in the fight to save preborn babies. You can donate online at actionforlife.org. Thank you, and God bless. Welcome back to a conversation with Father Orsi. I'm BC Cloutier. We're talking about IVF today, Father, and I had a great question, only it escapes my mind now.
All right, I can answer that.
No, all kidding aside, one of the things that happened immediately when the Alabama Supreme Court decision was announced was that the pro-choice crowd jumped on it and said, this is the end of IVF. You people are just, well, as it turns out, that's not the case. There is legislation pending in the Alabama legislature or Senate, one or the other, and ditto at the national level.
Right.
So, again, I think that an issue, a very, very important issue, conundrum, I think is an appropriate word, is being tossed around as a political football, and it's very unfair.
It really is. It's unfair to especially people who are desperate for a child. It's unfair to people born of IVF. Now, let's face it. I mean, there are people now in their 20s and 30s, maybe even more, that are born that way.
Sure, yeah.
So what are you doing? You're going to be upsetting them. This is a ploy on the part of Planned Parenthood. They don't want anybody to interfere in their industry, which unfortunately is based on abortion, and
it's a money machine.
Yeah, and they don't want the embryo to be discussed as human life. Okay? Now, again, we have these issues being debated in each state individually. Alabama has debated the issue. And as I said, the main issue here is not from the court, stating that, making a statement that embryos are inviolable and that they cannot be, tampered with. But the statement here is that they must be cared for. It doesn't say they have to be brought to term. There's the difference, folks. It doesn't say they have to be brought to term.
But if you were to destroy those embryos because they're not being used, then that is murder, correct?
Well, if you intentionally destroy them, then it's homicide. If you intentionally destroy them. But even the person that dropped the tray, it doesn't seem like that was an intentional act at all.
I wouldn't think so.
It certainly might be negligence on the part of the laboratory that was storing them. They didn't have sufficient security. Right. Certainly, the person that dropped them, breaking and entering. There are a whole list of crimes there before you get to homicide. But if somebody goes in there with the intention, hey, I'm going to destroy these embryos, I suppose you could say, that's homicide.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines that, a couple has, let's say, 2 children with IVF, and there are leftover embryos, and they don't want them.
Right.
The embryos have served their purpose. And so it could be argued, I'm not making this argument, but I'm saying it could be argued that the most merciful thing to do would be to destroy the remaining embryos, but that flies in the face of that at conception,
right?
It is a life,
right?
And so,
right. I was at a conference a number of years ago. This is not a new problem, only new insofar as the Alabama court made it a current topic, but it's gone on for say 20 or 30 years. And I said to some bioethicists, I was on a committee. I said, well, what do you propose we do with the embryos? And of course, some would say, well, you could use them for experimentation. We talked about the stem cell lines.
Yep.
Another one said, well, he says, the best thing we could do is pray for a power outage. And that way they'll melt. And it would not be an intentional thing.
That would be an act of God.
And that would be an act of God. So it is a difficult problem.
Very.
But insofar as the churches are concerned, the churches have to make sure that they send out the message that these embryos already created are worthy of dignity and respect. I was reading something a number of years ago. We talked about, Protestants stay away from it and Catholics try to tackle it because we have a very rich philosophical tradition. Yeah. And we've spoken on medical ethics many times through the church teachings. But I was looking at what do the Orthodox Jews have to say about this. You know what they say? They say it's okay as long as a rabbi supervises the process of the planting the petri dish with the embryo created with the egg and
creating
sperm.
Or destroying?
Creating.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to a rabbi being there to destroy the embryos, which would be the equivalent of a funeral.
No.
But
the rabbi would be there to oversee the process of uniting the sperm and the egg. Now, why is that? And I think, and I really have to talk to an Orthodox rabbi, I have to say, why, Rabbi? And I think the answer might be because life is sacred. I think that might be the answer.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
Hey, gang. I know a lot of you sometimes can't watch all of our episodes of Action for Life. However, we have a solution for that. All you have to do is go to YouTube and search for Action for Life Florida. And you can catch up on all the shows, and guess what? Extra added bonus, you get to hear my weekly homily. So, YouTube and you make a fine couple.
And we're back. It's a conversation with Father Orsi. I'm BC Cloutier. Father, final thoughts on this very, very complicated issue.
It is, and I am very, very grateful to the Alabama Supreme Court. Most people are not grateful. I am grateful. And you know why? The jurisprudence of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Alabama, I think his name is Roy Parker. I mentioned that earlier. He follows the law. The law goes from 1875 in Alabama, wrongful death of a child, to 2022 and talk about human life is protected from conception till natural death. It's a very, very good legal ruling. He also goes back into theology. Now, law doesn't just develop out of the air. Well, I'm sorry.
Some law doesn't.
It used to be that way. You'd have to have some legal reasoning, and you'd have to show a long tradition with law. And he does show the long tradition with law of the sacredness of human life. What I'm most grateful to him for, and you should read the decision. That's a great decision. What I'm most grateful to him for, though, is to bring the topic up to the public at large. And to be aware that, hey, there is something different here. There is something that must be discussed. And it is the fact that embryos are human life. And how should the embryos be treated?
Right.
Okay. And what do we do with those embryos that are not being used? And why is it a wild west that we have out there with reproductive endocrinology? Because why? Nobody is giving any guidelines. And you know what? It might be too late. I don't know. The horse is already out of the barn with this whole thing.
Yep.
What I ask you folks is to be very, very careful with how you handle this topic with family, with friends, with children. Why? Because, as I said, many of us were products of embryonic implants.
Yep.
And maybe we were, put together in a petri dish at the beginning. But, the sperm and the egg, they belong to God. And then that embryo is made in the image and likeness of God. So that we have to be very careful that we don't let people think, hey, I'm less than human, or I was conceived in mortal sin, or my mother and father did something wrong. What about the rest of my brothers and sisters? Where are they? This is how serious this gets. So if you're thinking about having a child by embryonic implant, I would talk it over with your priest, your minister, talk it over with your rabbi, and then come to a decision as to what you want to do, what you think is the best thing for you to do, but also then to think this through to the fact that they may harvest a number of eggs and sperm, and you might have a number of embryos left in the nursery, like the Alabama case. And what do you want done with them? And a provision should be made in your will as to how you're going to pay for these embryos to stay in the nursery as long as they are embryos.
You know what, Father? I think we'll be talking a lot more about this subject.
I think so too. And I want to say, we all started off as embryos.
Good point. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll join us again next week, same time, same place. Until then, I'm BC Cloutier, wishing you a great week, and God bless.